It's time for Justice for All, Behind the Badge video, streamed live from Team Toyota Route 1 in Langhorne with your host, Tom Mellon, featuring Bucks County District Attorney Matt Weintraub and Bucks County Sheriff Fred Harran. Here's your host from Team Toyota, Tom Mellon.
Good morning and welcome to our wonderful show, Behind the Badge, with our Bucks County Sheriff, Fred Harran. We have some great great topic to discuss that will lead into branches of many aspects of police work, criminal activity, and how we're jumping into a new frontier with certain ways to could pick up crime and throw it away as the dirty particles that they are. But my name is Tom Mellon. I'm the host of the show, along with Fred Harran, and we have a special guest today, and our co-host here, Charlie Esposito, who is the president of our retired police, fire, and correctional officers in Philadelphia, and Chris McMullin, who you're going to be hearing from today. A great show that's ahead. I want to explain something that we became aware of it today. We're now going to be on YouTube. Is that right, Bray? YouTube. And if you have a pencil or a piece of paper, jot this down because it's important, because we'll have many more people with the ability to watch this show on YouTube.
We could be famous YouTubers soon.
We can, Fred. That's the truth. YouTube.com. That's Y-O-U-T-U-B-E, for those who didn't go to finish grammar school. But it's youtube.com/ and then the ampersand sign at WBCB, WBCB 1490. That's once again youtube.com/ at WBCB 1490. Welcome once again to Behind the Badge. This is a great show that with obviously the representation that we have here with the Bucks County Sheriff, Fred Harran. It's a fantastic show each and every month that we do it. The second Wednesday at 10 a.m. I want to say hello to some of my ardent supporters out there, especially Frank and Terry Colosi, who listen to us religiously every time we do our shows. I want to thank my good friend Joe Bartarillo. We had our police chief's show that Paul Muller, who's a sponsor of our show here, he sponsored it, the luncheon on June the 13th. And I had an opportunity to see a lot of my friends there, along with you. You were there as well. Your presence with some of our sheriffs.
Free lunch, I'll be there.
You're there all the time.
I'm there. I was there. I remember. Thank you very much.
Oh yeah, it's a great time to get out there and meet and see a lot of my good friends, like the chairman, Mike Cummings, Dan Friel, Bill McVeigh, who's the director for our Ben Salem.
Where's that at, Ben Salem?
Ben Salem's a big area, boy.
I don't know anything about it.
I think you do. You used to be the director of public safety for many, many years. Many moons ago now, it seems. But no, it was only, a couple of years ago?
About 18 months. Yeah, year and a half.
18 months. Jesus. Matty Weintraub was there, your friend, our good friend, and Jennifer Shern, our first assistant district attorney. But it was a great luncheon. I also want to thank all the sponsors and the supporters for our golf tournament, which was June the 26th, that our good friend Frank Pirano manned it together and put together with all of our volunteers.
Great tournament.
Pretty good. You hit the ball straight, didn't you?
I got a call from Joe Zaffron. We won second place in the third tier. So I normally never win anything, and that was we did not cheat either.
Well,
those were
about to ask that question.
No. We were 4 under. Those were hard numbers. Those were good numbers. We did not cheat. I'm not a big golfer, but I always bring a ringer with some ringers with me. A couple Philly guys.
You brought the power with you.
Yeah, a couple Philly cops and some firemen. So we did pretty good. 4 under wasn't bad.
4 under is fantastic.
And it was wet
It was.
course.
Yeah.
It was wet beyond wet.
So the ball wasn't traveling when it hit, Chris.
Golf path only, which I'm not real fond of, but
right.
A cart path only rather. So, but it was a good, and obviously, as you well know, a great cause.
Oh yeah, fantastic cause. As we were discussing, Chris, right before we began with our show this morning, asked, what is the cost for these events? When we bring 4 or 5 busloads of our military down to Washington, D.C. for a full day of honor, and it's $70,000 to $80,000. So I don't have the final numbers yet. We have a board meeting coming up at the end of the month, but it's somewhere around $25,000 that we raised. So these events are just so important. And then we have another one coming up, Labor Day, at Parks Casino, which is one of our major sponsors, as you're aware, Fred. At the racetrack, in the racetrack parking lot area, our car show, which Jerry Fretz runs for us.
Parks is they've been a great partner since they got here in 06.
They're incredible.
People don't realize what they do for this community, but I was just thinking, not to segue, but because not to get off topic, but you should take a cause up in Washington. I think that Congress should fund Tour of Honor to any community that wants to do this anywhere in the country.
That's a great thought.
Our military do not get enough from this country, and that's something that should. It's low hanging fruit. It's $70,000 for the U.S. government to fund a program, once, twice a year if you do it. Even if 100 communities do it, which you're not going to get 100 communities to do it, it's a no-brainer.
They spend money ridiculously for so many other projects and agendas.
Your show. Don't get me started. That's 3 shows.
That's 3 or 4 shows at least. It's just incredible how they recklessly spend the money, and yet a cause like this it's a way to pay a tribute to our military.
It's a great day. I mean, I went twice, and it's a long, great day, and you just and I've seen all those sites. I can't even tell you, but to see it with the military, and I went down on one of the times I was staying with a guy who was in Patton's Third Army, which my dad was in Patton's Third Army.
Wow!
So to stand next to him and we just small talk and BSing, and to find out that he was, of course, they didn't know each other, but
sure.
The fact that he was in Patton's Third Army in Europe was kind of interesting, and for a few seconds, it just brought back some really fond memories for me of listening to my dad's stories. But we're getting way off topic.
No, that's all right. It was great.
We have a hard time finding World War II veterans today.
How many do we have? I think we have a few of them. They're near the 100 age.
Yeah.
Yeah, there are
not many left.
Yeah.
No, there's not many that are with us.
Yeah, not many.
But it's just wonderful to see that, and to be with them, just the mere existence of them and to be in their presence is a true honor, it really is. But yes, good point. We should bring that up at the next meeting, that we should transcend this across the country, other areas. We should be funded.
Brian Fitzpatrick, I think, would work with you on this.
Yeah.
I think this is right up his alley.
Yeah.
I don't want to speak for the congressman, but
no.
I mean, he's there, whatever you need. You come to him with a good idea, he's taking it and running with it.
Yeah.
And he's got some good positions in D.C. right now, so I would reach out to him.
Take advantage of it while we can. We have good representation out there, that's for sure.
Yeah, the hard part is getting enough people to sign on,
Yeah.
Every time, look at all the trouble we're having with the Windfall Act.
My God,
you never get enough people to sign on to it.
Well,
it's another topic
we can't,
that we could go on.
We don't try.
Long topic.
As I have to give credit to Matt Weintraub because I steal this saying from him. When's the 2 best times to plant a tree? Today and 30 years ago. Yeah. So we can't worry about what we didn't do. We got to do it today. That's not a Fred Harranism. That's a Matt Weintraubism.
That's a Mike. Yeah, Mike, you're giving him credit. That's incredible.
If I mention something and I don't give him credit for it, and I steal it, I'm going to be. You can't mess with the district attorney.
No, you can't. He'll be ready to prosecute you.
I'd soon to be a judge, hopefully.
Yeah, soon to be judge. Yeah, I called him Your Honor, and he gets very embarrassed. You can't call him that as of yet. But it's an honor to meet him, you know him.
He's been on a few trips, too.
Oh, yes, he has. Matt's been on several of our shows. Well, we're going to be talking today, another special topic, genealogy. Genealogy. There's a discerning factor there between the two. And Chris McMullin, who is going to explain a lot, delineate a lot of these factors that have proven to be very effective for solving crimes and prosecuting as well. But I'm going to leave that all up to Chris. And let me bring you right in, Chris. Welcome to our show.
Thank you.
And we're happy to have you. Let's give us a little bit about your background as well.
I currently work at the Sheriff's Office
with Sheriff Harran. Prior to that,
I'm sorry to hear that. No, I'm just kidding.
Prior to that, I worked with him for 30 years prior to that, too. So
really
maybe sorry to hear that. But
wow, that's incredible.
Right to heaven.
I retired from Ben Salem in March of 22, and 3 weeks later, I was drafted. So
that's terrific. You're with a hell of a team, I'm telling you.
Yeah.
It's great.
But I did have some cases in Ben Salem that involved investigative genetic genealogy.
Okay.
And that was quite an experience. We had a couple cases that were they were both Jane Does. They were unidentified decedents. They had been found skeletal remains. One was found in January of 1988 down on State Road in an old abandoned distillery called the Publicker Distillery. And she had been referred to as either Publicker Jane Doe or Bucks County Jane Doe. Interesting about her, she was not only she was skeletal, but within her remains there were fetal bones, so she was pregnant when she died.
Oh, God.
And then there was another one in 1995 that was discovered right on Street Road behind the Clubhouse Diner in Ben Salem. And that was also an adult female, and she was also skeletal. That one was actually classified as a manner of death was a homicide. The other one, Bucks County Jane Doe, she was cause and manner of death were listed as undetermined back in '88. But I dove into those cases back around, I think it was around 2002. I started opening up the cold cases. And a big thing with cold cases now is, to try to bring them up to current standards with where technology is at. And back in '02, investigative genetic genealogy wasn't on the scene yet, but there was DNA, and I was able to get a grant to have the remains from both of those victims sent down to the Center for Human Identification. It was a grant. It was called the President's DNA Initiative. And what they did was they extracted DNA profiles from both of the decedents and uploaded it into what's called the CODIS system, computerized DNA indexing system. And what that's for is so I would put the profiles of both Jane Does in, and the theory is the way it works is that if somebody has a missing relative, whether it had been locally or could have been on the other side of the country, they could submit their DNA to local law enforcement. And every few weeks, the CODIS system would match up the unknown profiles to the family reference samples of people that are missing a relative. And from time to time, you would get a match. And that was how the CODIS system works. So I wanted to get them, get that done. And, that was an accomplishment to get that done. And years went by, and between the two Jane Does, we probably had close to 50 possibilities that were ruled out through the DNA with CODIS.
Boy, it's extremely effective how this type of technology that has advanced and has risen to the surface where we're using it with resolving criminal activity and also discovering and providing some dignity to the family members that you probably don't even know about.
Yeah, I mean, what really fueled me was especially with the first one I started working on, the Bucks County Jane Doe from the distillery. She was estimated, the anthropologist estimated that she was anywhere from 17 to 21 years old. So she was very young, she was pregnant, and she had some nice clothes, but she was wearing designer clothes. She had a bag with other clothing, and I kept saying, and Fred will tell you this, for years I kept saying, somebody has got to be missing this girl. And despite our attempts in the media that we had a forensic sculpture made over her skull to kind of show what she looked like during life, yes, and put that out into the media, hoping that somebody would see it and say, hey, that looks like somebody we knew, but we never got any leads. And I actually started to think that maybe she wasn't from around this area.
Makes sense.
And the sculpture looked like her when you finally got a picture of her. Yeah, so it actually did look like her.
It did,
yeah.
Really.
So fast forward to January of 22, we were able to get another DNA profile extracted from the remains with the help of Bodie Laboratories.
Right.
and that was uploaded into the various public DNA genealogy databases. And I worked with a DNA genealogist, on this case named Yolanda McClary, and I couldn't keep up with her. Once she got that profile uploaded and she started to build the family tree, it was all I could do to keep chasing the leads that she would give me.
Oh my God, yeah.
Yeah, and it was over the course of 4 days, and because sometimes you still hit variables. We would get a first cousin match with somebody that lived in, I think it was in the Poconos area.
Yeah.
And then I would track that person down and get a phone number and call her and tell her who I am. And that's a strange phone call to get.
Oh my God, yeah.
So you have to kind of lay the foundation for that. I can't just,
Exactly.
But,
can we interrupt for
sure.
a second? I just want to take a moment to recognize our sponsors. Bree was just giving us a shout. But let's just pick up right from there, because this is incredibly interesting for our listeners and for all of us here to know what's, the effectiveness of this type of work. You're listening to Chris McMullin, who is with the Bucks County Sheriff's Department, along with Fred Harran, Charlie Esposito, and myself, Tom Mellon. We'll be right back. We're back here at Team Toyota in the showroom. Paul Muller, the sponsor of this wonderful show, where we bring very important information, notable points of interest, the work of our Sheriff's Department, our District Attorney's Office, our prosecutors, our police officers. It's a great show, and I'm excited to continue to bring this to you, our listeners, now on YouTube, youtube.com/@WBCB 1490, and you can also listen to this remotely from home on 107.3 FM on the dial now as well. But we're back with Chris McMullin, and I want to bring you, let's go right back into what you were explaining about this.
So I had mentioned that a forensic sculpture had been made over the decedent's skull to try and resemble what she may have looked like in life. And fast forward to January of 22, when we were actually doing investigative genetic genealogy, and Yolanda was building the tree. So I tracked down an association of somebody that was a first cousin. So I was hoping that, when I called her and explained to her who I was and what I was doing, she would say, yeah, I did have a cousin that vanished. But she had actually been adopted.
Oh, my goodness.
So she said to me, I would love to help you, but I don't have much information on my blood relatives. Okay, fair enough.
Interesting.
So they're the kind of brick walls and, things you would hit. But we just kept going along. And on day 4, Yolanda called me and said, check your email. I sent you 2 names, Joseph Todd and Linda Todd. They both live in Philadelphia. She told me, she said, your Jane Doe is their sister. And that was a pretty bold statement,
Wow.
I was okay. I'll track down Linda and Joseph Todd. And I remember I was on night work. It was a Friday evening, and it was cold. It was rainy, and I couldn't find phone numbers. I'm like, okay, I'm going to go down into the city and start knocking on doors. But I did another deep dive, and I found a phone number for Joseph, and I actually reached his daughter. So once again, I told her who I was, and I said, this is going to sound like a strange phone call, but I've been working on this case. At the time, I was working on the case for 19 years. So I told her about the case.
Frozen case, not a cold case, right?
I told her about the case and what had led me up to calling her. And I said, with all that being said, I said, did your father ever have I didn't even say sister, I said sibling. I said, did your father have a sibling that disappeared or vanished? And she paused, and she said, yes, he had a sister that disappeared in 1985.
My God.
And I said, what was her name? And she said, Lisa. So
what a break.
Finally had her name, Lisa Todd. So
Yeah.
I said, please have your father call me as soon as he gets home. Half an hour later, he called me. He was very emotional. And myself and a couple other detectives drove down to his home in Northeast Philadelphia. So
emotional for you as well.
it was. It absolutely was. It was a relief. But, like I had said a little while ago, I thought maybe she wasn't even from the area. She only lived 15 minutes away from where she was found.
Incredible. Incredible.
Yet, nobody ever, it was never figured out prior to that. So I went down and I saw him. I brought photographs. I showed him pictures of the jewelry that were found with her, and he recognized it right away. And the clothing, and then told me that she had disappeared at the age of 17 in 1985.
Remarkable.
So then we did some follow-up testing. We did direct comparisons with him and his sister to the remains, and it just verified that it was a first-degree relative. So my first attempt at investigative genetic genealogy, and once we actually got all the preliminary lab work and everything done, it was solved in 4 days.
Wow.
It's absolutely amazing. The technology.
Yeah, you know what's sad is a lot of these girls, people just assume they're runaways, and don't hear anything, and it never gets followed up for years and years until they find remains.
Yeah.
Because especially a pregnant girl.
Well, you gotta remember too. Like a city like Philadelphia, I don't know how many homicides they had last night, but they can't keep up with the cases from the night before because there's just so many. So a lot of people aren't working, like a missing persons and stuff. And we do. I mean, even in Ben Salem, you get a ton of missing persons reports, and in 24 hours, the kids just went to somebody's house, and very, very rarely is it a true. And what's frustrating with that is a lot of times the people don't call back and say he or she came home. So there's a lot of just follow-up that always has to be done, and unfortunately this one slipped through the cracks.
My God, so long. I mean, and this provided...
Yeah, she'd been missing 36 years.
36 years.
Yeah, crazy. Yeah.
So that provides the impetus for you to continue with encouragement.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what was really... So when she vanished, she had a son that was about 2 years old. And Joseph Todd had told me that. So the son was now living out of state. So I called the son and I told him. And he actually made a trip into Pennsylvania, and he was extremely grateful. He just said, he said, I had spent my whole life thinking that my mother abandoned me. And
oh my God.
He said, now I know that's not the case. And for him, it was just, people... At times, it's, why do you go to the trouble to do these types of cases? Because you may not make a difference to the whole world, but you make a very big difference to the people that it involves.
Right.
And, my thing was, Ben Salem, we were bordered Philadelphia, and we had, our share of crime, but I didn't think that we had enough where we should just accept cold cases. Mm-hmm. So
sure.
I just wanted like I said, bring them up to current standards and do everything that we could do that hadn't been available in the past, and maybe solve it.
So how did the, without mentioning companies' names, how did the genealogist find the Todds?
Once the profile was uploaded into the public databases, they just start working on associations, and they literally they build a family tree, and more people than we realize are putting their DNA out there to find relatives and ancestors, and I remember when I was a little kid, my grandmother used to like to build a family tree, but it was all based upon records.
Sure.
Now it's based upon DNA records, so it's a whole new level.
And I think that's really, before we're going to hear some more stories from Chris.
Of course.
Chris, he won't admit what I'm about to say, but as far as I'm concerned, he's probably the leading expert. You got Glenn Vandergriff in Ben Salem, who's probably the number one DNA expert in the county for sure, probably way outside our county. And then you've got Chris McMullin, who, as far as investigating in cold cases and using this, there's not too many other people using this sort of stuff. But it's going to become more and more. But I think we should talk about, too, because people don't realize, I see, different companies online, Christmas time, buy one, get one free, DNA swab. People do it for I'm not saying for a gimmick, but just out of curiosity, see
For
their
kicks.
family tree, for kicks. Let's swab ourselves, and we put it off to the company. And we get to see what hits we have. I mean, I've done it myself. My DNA is in Ben Salem's database, number one, or the county's database, but it's also in a company's database, out in the world, because I don't plan on committing any crime, so I'm not really worried about it.
Thank God. What a story that would create.
Yeah, that would be a nice story. But,
oh my God.
So I'm not really worried about my DNA floating out there.
Right.
So what does it mean as far as not only cold cases, which we're going to continue with, but also for solving crime? If you put your DNA and you got a fourth cousin or a cousin or whatever out there, or maybe a brother or a sibling or whoever who's committing crimes, and they don't have their DNA in the database, it'll hit to your DNA, and it's the genetic genealogist then that can start linking it back to who the actual criminal is, because it doesn't show you, it shows that a relative of yours could be a son, could be a brother, depending on the DNA matches.
Of course.
And the amount that's in there, what it hits to. It could show a cousin, and the technology in 2023 is just amazing. When we started DNA in Ben Salem in 2010, I was actually asked a question, will you ever look at relatives and doing relatives DNA? And I said no, because then it wasn't really a possibility.
Right.
You can't ask me, well, one day will I go to the weekend to Venus and land and spend a weekend at the beach in Venus?
Yeah.
No, because I don't think it's a possibility. I don't know anything,
Exactly.
but if it's a possibility one day and it's affordable, maybe my mind will change.
Yeah.
So DNA, it is now very affordable, and it's not a possibility, it's a reality that we could do this testing and track criminals, not just missing people and solving crime that way, but actually find criminals that don't have their DNA in a database. In Pennsylvania, we're a convicted felon state, so only convicted felons get their DNA in what Chris has talked about, the CODIS database. We're trying to change that law in Pennsylvania and make it an arrestee state. There's 31 arrestee states where DNA is taken at time of arrest. Pennsylvania is not one of those states.
We need to change that.
Well, it needs to be changed because you're going to be able to prevent a lot more crime. But I know we got to go to a break.
Yeah, we're going to take a quick break. And you're listening to Fred Harran, the sheriff of Bucks County, Chris McMullin with the Sheriff's Department, genealogist and expert when it comes to finding the root of a lot of these aspects with individuals that have been missing for, talk about a cold case, some of them appear to be frozen because of 35, 40, 50 years. And it requires a lot of work, but it restores pride and dignity to the individual and relief to the families and relief to the investigators as well.
It gives them their name back.
It gives them their name back, that's for sure. Once again, we're going to take a quick station break to recognize our sponsors. I'm Tom Mellon. Don't go anywhere. We have a lot more to share with you on this specific topic. We're back with our show here, Behind the Badge, with Bucks County Sheriff Fred Harran and our special guest today, Chris McMullin, also attached to the, with all of his experience with the Sheriff's Department. Charlie Esposito, to your right, to my left, and I'm Tom Mellon. We're going to get right back into the nuts and bolts of genealogy and the effectiveness of it and all. Chris, I'll give it back to you.
Like the sheriff was saying earlier, with us not being an arrestee state, I mean, and looking at relatives, I mean, really, what really, to the best of my knowledge, what kicked off investigative genetic genealogy was when it was used to identify the Golden State serial killer, and that's a perfect example of it. But we had another case in Ben Salem. We had another Jane Doe, the one I had mentioned that was found in '95, and we were able to also get her profile uploaded into the genetic databases. And that time I worked with a friend of mine who's a very good genealogist named Jennifer Moore, and she literally solved it in 24 hours.
Wow.
Yeah.
How incredible.
I had her look at the file, and she called me on a Sunday morning and said, "Your Jane Doe's grandparents are from Schuylkill, Pennsylvania. Do you want me to keep going?" I said, "Yeah, I want you to keep
Absolutely.
going." And by Monday morning around 11 a.m., she gave me a name. And again, just like Lisa Todd, this girl, her name was Mary Beth Hodgkinson. She was found in Ben Salem. She was from Warminster.
Close. My goodness.
Very close. And again, that case had been put into the media a lot. There were sculptures done. And that sculpture, like the Lisa Todd one, actually did look like her in life. But unfortunately, the associations were never made until we were able to do it with DNA and verify, this is who she is. So it's a fantastic tool for investigating unidentified decedents. And like when I mentioned with the Golden State serial killer, that technique can also be used to find perpetrators that, not trying to identify a decedent, but trying to identify a criminal that's actively out doing criminal activity.
Certainly.
When I retired, still wanting to be involved with this sort of thing, myself and another friend of mine, a retired trooper, Tom McAndrew, we started a nonprofit organization called Cold Case Initiative. And our sole purpose is to raise money to help law enforcement agencies offset the cost of this type of forensic work. I was fortunate. I came from Ben Salem, and I had a boss that was supportive of my efforts, and I was able to get the funding for those things. But not every agency is like that. And like I said, you have to bring these cases up to modern day standards. So we established Cold Case Initiative, and we coldcaseinitiative.org. We have a website. You can see, who we are and what we're about and what we do. And right now we're working on a case out of state where there have been 3 sexual assaults, and on all the victims it is common DNA. It's the same offender. And we're helping the authorities in another state right now. We're building a family tree, and we're going to figure out who this offender is. So we're going to use the same technology to prevent more crime.
That's incredible. It really is. And the funding for people who are listening in, if they want to get involved and see the effectiveness and the purpose for it, for families to restore their, just be at ease knowing what occurred. What is the name of the organization again? And do you have a number that someone could call if they wanted to?
A website?
It's a website, coldcaseinitiative.org.
Okay.
And we're a registered 501c3. If you make a donation, it's tax deductible. And some of the cases we're working on are profiled on the website. And, we try and, as they progress, give updates on it. But, we're pretty new. Right now we have 2 cases we're actively working on. We have a John Doe that we're working on. There's a John Doe buried right here in Bucks County in Doylestown Cemetery. He was a drowning victim that was found on in the Delaware River, right on the Pennsylvania side in Ben Salem back in October of '03, and he was never identified. So after forming CCI, that's what we call our nonprofit, that was the first case I went after because I was involved in that case and I wanted to solve it. Yeah. So Director McVeigh agreed to allow our nonprofit to work with Bensalem Police. So right now that evidence is in the lab, and we're trying to get that profile developed and find out who this gentleman is as well.
Yeah, that's incredible. And the other crime that the person's involved with several different rapes that they're trying to...
Yeah, that's down in Georgia. There's 3 victims, and I know that we're at the point where we're building the family tree, and we are honing in on somebody.
So all of these prove to be very effective, and it's helping resolve these crimes and bringing people to justice, which is most important, especially the serial culprits that are out there, whether it's homicide or rape, any of your felonious crimes.
I mean, the technology is here, and we, I wasn't, can you imagine when fingerprints were first, used, and everybody thought, oh my God,
Sure.
And now, the Supreme Court has actually commented in a 2014 case out of Maryland that DNA is like fingerprints. It's just it's just investigative.
Yeah.
And the technology, and it's something not to be afraid of. And we've talked about this before, maybe a year ago when it was on the show, and certainly Bensalem and Bucks County has become known literally worldwide on our use of DNA every day. And in 2017, in March of 2017, then President Trump signed the Rapid DNA Act. And we became the first police department in the nation to utilize DNA 24 hours a day, rapid DNA. And now that's spreading. More and more departments are getting involved with the use of rapid DNA 6 years later in 2023. And soon, in a couple of years, you'll be able to download, into the FBI database. And crime scene DNA eventually. In a couple of years. So the technology keeps evolving. We shouldn't be afraid of it. There's a lot of, naysayers out there, that you profile people utilizing DNA. It's not possible. It's science. There's no human element to it. It's strictly science. The cops don't do anything with it. It's the computer, the software, and the lab folks that have no names or anything associated with the DNA that we submit to them. It's just a number. So it's the most non-biased, tool you could use, and I think people just need to get more acclimated to the use of it. Talking about like what Chris does with it, it helps identify people, but also helps identify criminals, as we started talking about before.
Most importantly, yeah.
And you know what? If your third cousin's committing crime, who cares? We
want to prevent it from happening
you do want
again.
to, because he or she could be committing crime against one of your own loved ones.
That's
How many people actually know their third or fourth cousin? Not too many.
No.
So it's there, and we need to not be afraid of it. And people are putting their DNA in the databases, through a lot of these commercial companies that are trying to, that will use it to track down your ancestry and where are you from the world, and I'm 98% Mediterranean and blah blah blah, wherever you're from.
Sure.
So it's a great tool, and we shouldn't be afraid of it. Charlie, we talked at the break. Back in 2014 or 13 in Bensalem, we did a community event where we gave people their children's DNA profile. We didn't keep it in our database. We had it.
They had it. The parents had it.
Yeah, we gave them we ran them through the DNA testing, and then they got their child's profile. That, God forbid, if anything ever happened, they would have their kid's profile on file, and then we could put it into a database. And if a child turned up, we'd be able to identify them, not hopefully a dead child, but a live child, through utilizing touch DNA and other things like that. So the possibilities are endless out there, and we really shouldn't be afraid of it, because look at the cases, look at the people that Chris is affecting, the son who thought his mother abandoned him. What kind of damage does that do over the years? I can't imagine the damage. I don't think any of us can wrap our arms around on that. But through Chris's work and the other detectives that worked on the case with him, you not only did you give peace to a 17-year-old who was murdered rather, but the domino effect on family is endless.
Irrevocable harm that was caused, obviously, for this person. It's had to be extremely, not had to be, it definitely was extremely traumatic.
Yeah, we had another missing persons case, a girl named Jeanette Tamby who had disappeared in 1984, and there was a time that I thought the publicer Jane Doe, who we know now as Lisa Todd, there was a time I thought she may have been Jeanette Tamby, and so I was trying to pursue that avenue, and Jeanette's parents were both deceased and had been cremated, so I couldn't get DNA that way, but I did track down a brother who lived in the Poconos and got his DNA, and I did a comparison thinking that, it's going to be Jeanette, and it wasn't, but here Jeanette was a unidentified murder victim in Buena, New Jersey that had been found in 1986.
My God, the way you stir up
so,
activity.
Which was, it was great that we solved our missing persons case. Unfortunately, Jeanette was dead, and it was a homicide. And then, so we identified New Jersey's victim.
Yes.
Still left the case, who's my Jane Doe at this time, but it works. That was the first time, it was my first experience where, hey, CODIS works, DNA comparisons work.
Yes, it does.
And so, and it made a difference to her brother.
Wow.
Because, for 29 years he'd been looking for his sister.
That's incredible. And, obviously you're trying to fight with for legislation to have the state of Pennsylvania pass this law, Fred, which, how many states are now?
31 states have arrestee legislation. So we actually, we have some legislators working on it. I know Senator Frank Farry and State Representative Casey Tomlinson, who replaced Gene DiGirolamo, who's now our county commissioner. Very passionate. I've worked with Senator Farry when he was Representative Farry on some other stuff, and Frank's you give him something to do,
he pursues it.
He pursues it. He's a worker. And Casey too. Before I left Ben Salem, she was doing some amazing stuff. She got some laws passed. She got some good funding opportunities for Ben Salem. So she's another one, a hard worker. Now you got people like Joe Hogan, out there. So, and I don't want to mention names because I'll forget people, I'm sure. But you've got a lot of good people in Harrisburg, a lot of people here in Bucks County on both sides of the aisle working hard for us in Harrisburg. But this is stuff that you gotta keep on top of.
Absolutely. We're going to take another quick pause to recognize our sponsors, and it's a great show, as I'm sure our listeners are aware of it. And remember, YouTube, right, Charlie? What is that YouTube site again? You could have said it. I would have let you.
You have such a better voice.
Oh, I don't know about that. But youtube.com/the Amber Soul sign at WBCB 1490. We're going to be doing our shows now live on YouTube as well. Isn't that right, Bray? Our engineer over there that does a remarkable job. I can't give her enough recognition, right?
You can't. You know what? You know what she told me? Forget the recognition. Give her a raise.
That's even better. We'll work on that, right, Bray? And Chris McMullin, who's here, I want to thank you for being here, too, as well. We're going to take a quick pause. Don't go anywhere with Behind the Badge with Fred Harran, Charlie McSorley, yours truly, and Chris McMullins. We'll return after a few moments. Welcome back, and I hope you didn't fall asleep out there, because certainly these are eye-opening facts about life and how Chris McMullin's the investigative skills that he has, along with the technology and the help with the nonprofits, to be able to continue this type of work. It's important. DNA, very important. It's here and it's effective, and it's much better. It's as good, if not better, than the fingerprints, obviously. And we want to finish up our show with Chris and with Fred about some other important matters here with this topic. So I'll leave it with you, Fred.
Yeah, as we come to the end of the hour, I've said this before, people just if we would call DNA ABC, people wouldn't be so afraid of it. But TV has made people, I guess, a little afraid of it.
Yeah.
Certainly it doesn't work as easy as that on television. But, we're there with the technology. Able to get DNA results in 90 minutes now is remarkable. What used to take us 18 months and then 30 days, we can now do in 90 minutes. So we need to embrace the technology like we would with anything else. We're very techno world, I guess you say we live in.
Sure.
Facial identification and artificial intelligence that we talked about last week. It's just, I don't know where the ending is in sight, but this is here today. People are voluntarily giving their DNA into these commercial databases, which I gave my DNA into. Unless you want to be a criminal, who cares?
That's true.
It's help to solve crime, prevent crime, identify bodies, bring closure to families, which we'll talk about with Chris in a minute and bring this to a wrap. But it just has so many multiple uses, and God forbid, something ever happens to a child, you can utilize DNA. I'm looking at some other software now for facial identification to bring to the county. We've been looking with a company to bring some really neat stuff, but people get really skitsy with it, and I don't get it. I guess if I had some criminalness in me, I would be skitsy with it too. But if you're doing everything above board and you want to be a good citizen,
sure.
This technology is only helping our community, not hurting our community. You watch episodes of Law and Order and stuff like that where they manipulate DNA and things like that. That's not a possibility today, and if it ever became a possibility, we'll deal with it then, and we'll move on to something else.
Of course.
But not today. It's not. And you use it for mass disasters, for identifying folks. When Bin Laden was killed, it was by SEAL Team 6.
Great moment.
It was DNA they had from his brother that positively identified him. If you saw that, I forget that one movie.
That was a
Zero
good movie.
Zero Dark 30.
Yeah.
That last scene there, when they had him on that stretcher and she was, her case was coming to a close. It was his brother's DNA that they had from one of their raids or whatever that they got, I think hair. But that's how they positively identified him at the end of the day. So the technology's been around. It's just now becoming readily available for civilian law enforcement. And I'd like to see, every police department in America utilizing it. I mean, we were certainly not the first to utilize it, but we were number 5 in the country to utilize DNA in the capacity we are. But we were number 1 to utilize rapid DNA, so we can take credit for that. And then Bucks County became the first county in the nation where every police department was utilizing DNA every day for solving crime. We became the first county that had multiple police departments, not talking about like New York County, which is NYPD, or Philadelphia County, which is Philadelphia PD,
right.
But a county in America that made up of multiple, and for us it's 39 police departments that made up multiple municipalities that all work together, and that holds true today. We started in 2015 with the entire county, and 8 years later, it's still going strong and stronger. And I can't talk about something that's hopefully going to happen in the next couple of months. We'll wait for I'm not the person to make that announcement, but there's going to be some interesting stuff happening for us in this county.
And I know you're behind a lot of these effective
well, I'm just
movements.
One of the spokes on the wheel. It doesn't work. The wheel doesn't turn smoothly without everybody being tight and working together.
There's no I in team.
There's no I in team. What about team team?
Hasn't the cost of the DNA testing that's went down a lot?
Oh, the cost actually has gone up a little bit because of the chemical costs. But it's funny talking about we proposed a program years ago, and Mike Fitzpatrick was still a U.S. Congressman, to utilize DNA in a wide scale to identify the missing MIAs that they're finding bones.
That was my next question.
All over the world, especially in Korea, Vietnam, and even in Europe to this day. And we did a presentation to the Senate Armed Services Committee. I forget what year it was, and I figured out the cost if they identified every missing MIA, and that's if they found 6 or 7 bones from everyone, which are not good. It would be less than the cost of 2 F-15 fighter jets. Wow. That's wow. It's another whole show. The proposal.
Yeah, that's a.
But it was pretty interesting. But we got shot down, and anyway, we didn't do it. But Chris, I know you have an interesting story about the nonprofit, and I think the viewers would be
absolutely
would be
well. We
very interested.
Still have a little bit of time.
Just touching on what you said about the MIAs. I can relate to that on a personal level. My mother's father, my grandfather, he was lost in World War II. He was on a submarine, and the submarine's overdue and presumed lost.
Oh, boy.
It's never been found. So, I to this day, I know how that. My mother never met her father. He was at sea when she was born.
How sad.
But anyway, talking about, resistance to DNA, I mean, why would you not want to identify criminals?
That makes no sense.
Why would you not want to identify John and Jane Doe decedents? I mean, I talk about Lisa Todd's son and the difference it made to him.
Yes.
And her brother and sister. Jeanette Tamby, again, her brother. And then with Mary Beth Hodgkinson, with her family. And one of the things, if you go to coldcaseinitiative.org and you see our logo, I've incorporated some starfish into our logo. And that's not by accident. What really started motivating me, aside from the fact that I just did not like unsolved cases.
Sure,
but I heard a story one time. It was written by a woman named Lauren Isley. So I'm not taking credit for this. This was a poem that was written quite a while ago, but it's called The Starfish Story. And the long and the short of it is there's a beach after a big storm, and there are thousands of starfish that have washed up on the shore. And there's a young boy who's going around and he's picking up starfish as fast as he can, and he's throwing them back into the ocean. Eventually, he crossed paths with an elderly gentleman who's supposedly very wise in his years, and he says to him, young man, what are you doing? And he says, I have to throw the starfish back in the ocean or they'll die. And the man kind of scoffs and he looks at him. He says, young man, take a look at the beach. There are thousands of starfish here. How can you possibly make a difference? And with that, the little boy picks up a starfish, throws it in the water, and says, I made a difference to that one.
One difference right there. Remarkable. Good statement.
It's a great story.
So,
was Tom Mellon the old man on the beach?
He may have been.
He's selling a car.
Yeah, right.
So, that's really, why do you do this? You do it to make a difference to the families, make a difference to society.
Sure. Good point. Well, what an impression to make, and how true it is. And as Fred pointed out, for our listeners to understand the importance of legislation so that we can get DNA effectiveness to a much higher scale, so that we can reduce crime.
And even if people, if I know times are tough, if they're not unable to donate to a nonprofit like mine or another one, there's other ones like mine too. I mean, I'm not original in that aspect, but just put your DNA into a public database. Because although, you're not doing anything wrong, like we said,
great point.
You may have a descendant that is out there offending, so you can even help with the cause that way.
Of course.
With making an identification. Like Fred said, if you didn't do anything wrong, you didn't do anything wrong.
Right. Let's find the ones that are guilty out there and stop them from causing more harm to families.
I mean,
what's that website again?
www.coldcaseinitiative.org.
Yeah. And that's a nonprofit 501c3.
Correct.
And it's a way for you to contribute, to help, because obviously money is, as with everything, an important factor. So that we can continue to...
Any donations all go towards cases. It's a labor of love. Myself and some of the other people that are behind the scenes, we do not take a salary from this at all.
No.
It's just a pure labor of love to just try and get these cases solved.
God bless you for what you're doing, Chris. And you can see the intent and the seriousness. and the commitment that Chris has made and continues to make for for families out there that are lost. They've lost identity with their family.
Like I said, although I retired from police work, I wasn't done. So this is a way that
Well, you're still a young man, so yeah.
This is a way I can still keep trying to help out.
No, you're not.
Yeah, I'm old.
You look good for 48.
Charlie, I'm getting up there, man. I'm coming around second base, going to third.
Okay.
Yeah, I slid into home.
You slid into home. Oh, no, you don't want to slide into home. That's not good. Right, Bree? Yeah, that's no way to end the show. But quick excerpt on your presidency with the police, fire, and correctional officers. People come up to me a lot of times and say, well, what is it all about? Why should I join?
Well, just like our guest is saying, the more members we have and it's more power we have when we have to go to Harrisburg or something and argue something, because when
to make a
these
statement.
Politicians know you have 5,000 votes in your pocket, they're a little more favorable to you.
That's a good point, Freddie.
And then, not only that, you get together with your friends, you get a newspaper so you're updated on all your. We have an obit section.
Right.
A lot of times guys don't know that one of their friends passed away. And all our stories on show, all the events we go to. We did one on the tour. It was really
yes, we
nice.
Did. Yeah.
So it's a great, and we have luncheons. We have general body meetings. It's a great way to keep in contact with your fellow.
Is it by county or is it just?
No, anybody can join.
That's the best part.
Anybody can join. We have associates. We have widowers. We have associate members that want to join. So anybody can join our organization, and you're entitled to everything but a vote if you're not a police officer. So when we have our votes every other year, or at a meeting. Right. If you're an associate, you're just not allowed to vote, but you're entitled to everything else.
Well, we're down to 1 minute, but we have 2 applications for Chris and Freddie here, right?
Yeah, in the car.
2 applications, right? Yeah, in the car, and we'll get them to
$15 a year, the cheapest organization in the city, in the country.
Not bad.
Wow.
Not bad.
The Tom Mellon fan club is cheap.
You get the money back. Our biggest